Uh-oh.
Hello, Haima.
Hello.
Namaste, Swami.
Namaste indeed.
Good evening.
Yes. All right, let's see. This is a little high. Hello, Uma. Balakrishna. All right, we'll give people a couple of more minutes here.
I hope you're having nice weather in Atlanta, Swami.
I hope so too.
We have 69 today, 69 degrees in Denver.
Oh, wow.
Unusual.
It's going to be great. I'm going to get off my plane carrying my ski jacket and my gloves and my scarf and my hat.
Well, the
'Cause when
Tuesday, when you're coming on Tuesday, it's going to snow. 80% chance. It's coming Tuesday, you're coming back, right?
I come on Wednesday.
Oh, okay. Tuesday is the snow.
Okay,
We're supposed to have
that's
snow.
right.
You will see some snow.
Because when I left, it was 11 degrees.
I know, it was horrible that week.
So, well, I wouldn't say horrible. It was
Oh,
cold.
that was even 11 below zero. It went into with the wind chill. It was like minus 20.
Oh, wind chill.
Yeah, minus 20 and minus 10. 3-4 days. It was really cruel, brutal weather.
They only do wind chill, so it makes a good story.
I guess so. I guess so.
All right. Any more will come. Should we wait another minute or two? In our online classes, we normally wait 6 minutes. Ah, here it comes. Yes. Hey, Sean. You know, that verse that we read yesterday in Imitation of Christ, where he said you can't keep your mind on the senses and on the indwelling self at the same time. Yeah. We're going to run into word for word the exact same verse in the Katha Upanishad tonight. It confused me terribly because I read it and I was like, I thought, oh, we've already done this. And so I went to the next chapter and I was like, no, we're not there for sure. And then I realized I only remembered because the Imitation of Christ has that exact phrase, word for word. That's the Katha Upanishad. Interesting.
So is the Imitation of Christ a dialogue between a saint and Christ?
Not really. No, it's written by a monk in the Middle Ages. It's not considered a scripture. It's just it's kind of a handbook for monastics that was written. And the only reason that we chose it important enough is because Swamiji carried it with him when he wandered. He carried that and the Bhagavad Gita with him.
Swamiji, what is the author of your book, Imitation of Christ? Mine is slightly different. Mine is Thomas A. Kempis.
Yes, that's
It's the same one you have?
hmm Just we have
Mine-
just a different translation of it.
Yeah, mine is a smaller version. It's the same author, but it's a little bit different. When you're reading, I can't find those exact
Yeah,
lines.
it might be a different translation. There's
Different.
multiple translations of it.
Okay.
Which chapter are you reading?
Emphasis, probably German. What's that?
Which chapter are you reading?
We are on part 2, chapter 1.
No, I'm not talking about Katha Upanishad. I'm talking about
Oh boy.
Oh, that's tomorrow.
Okay, it's okay. It's
We
okay.
have tomorrow.
Yeah.
We have
Yeah,
tomorrow, right? Imitation of Christ.
Yes. Let me keep my mind on this side of the fence for tonight.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. I will talk to you tomorrow.
Is he for the order? I think he is. I think he's up with this. Yeah.
All right. We're going to go ahead and start. Anybody who comes in will just have to slam the door in the middle of the lecture. That's all. All right. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karava Vahaye Tejasvinavadi Tamastu Ma Vidvishavahaye. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May the divine being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the divine being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise among us. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Peace, Peace, Peace be unto us all. All right, so everybody here has been here, so we won't do a big review tonight. But we're here in the Katha Upanishad. We're in part 2, chapter 1, verse 1. And Yama is continuing his teaching on the nature of the divine self, the nature of what and who we really are, and kind of trying to help us come up with an understanding, really, just to get a clue. I'm using this quite a bit in my meditation in the mornings, just kind of to erase my assumed boundaries when I'm sitting there doing my meditation. You kind of mix it with the neti ideas. You keep backing out of any ideas. But I've also been kind of playing in the last few days with just removing boundaries, not just ideas in the mind, but the way that I imagine or perceive my meditation. That quite often we've got our images in our mind and whatnot, and we always pick a place, which is kind of a subtle thing that we do, usually without noticing, usually without thinking about it. You define a place within yourself where you're observing your meditation from, and where the feelings are touching you, and where your experience is kind of hitting you. And interestingly enough, I don't know, it somehow became aware of it yesterday, and began trying to erase that, trying to see myself, to sort of experience the practice of meditation as being sort of a breeze blowing through a screen door, instead of a closed door where the breeze hits the door and bounces back with an experience. I've been trying to see myself as being more of a screen door in my practice, so that the experiences don't bounce off me as an experience, which means they don't trigger the mind's awareness of that particular experience or noticing differences and ups and downs in the meditation, but to just simply let it pass through, and to not notice it, not pay attention to it, and not let it affect the conditionings of mind at all to grab my attention and to make me identify with a locale or with an experience, or even to see myself as the meditator, and trying to not be the doer in that, and trying to keep the mind on the fact that the reality that I'm meditating on is doing the work, that which whose name is being chanted in the mantra is the one who is doing the meditation, and who is fixing anything that may or may not need to be fixed, or correcting anything, so that I don't identify with a voice in the mind to do that myself, to see myself as teaching myself or training myself, but understanding that you know, that in truth I'm silent. In truth, I'm behind all of that. So this is sort of one playful way that you can try and use some of these teachings that Yama is going to give us tonight to sort of move around, as it were, in your meditation. I'm a big fan of having a meditation that actually is sort of like a lab experiment, so that we're not just sitting down and practicing the same ignorance over and over and over again. Yeah. You know, the same rote practice, but to really grab hold of these ideas and to meditate on them, to sit and think of the implications. How does this change me? You know, not just how does it fit into the philosophy and the thought structure of my mind, but how does this change how I meditate? How does this change my perception or understanding of what the nature of this I is as I'm meditating? What are the implications of it? And to be very dynamic in our exploration, actually turn our meditations as such at times into an exploration, to going into the inner world, and like you're going into a cave for the first time, looking around, noticing all the little things that are happening in there, watching the small thoughts of the mind that are more subtle than the thoughts you're identifying with, but are still there, sort of like gnats around a fly, as it were. So as we read this, you know, hear those things, and if definitely, if you don't understand something, or if something doesn't jive, or you don't quite get it, let's have a conversation about it. So don't be afraid to speak up about it. But in the end, think of how this can change you. Not that that's the small y you. Yeah. Of course, the big y you is doing fine. Yeah,
So your notion that meditation should be an experiment, how do we reconcile the notion that you should just dig one hole and
do what?
You should just dig one hole, as Ramakrishna says.
That is one hole means one ideal. Not about.
It could be doing the same practice, like the same way over and over as you get deeper and deeper, rather than experimenting.
Well, the same hole that he's talking about is, you know, you pick your tradition, you pick your path, you pick your guru, you pick your scriptures, and you stick with that. You know, because and the reason they make such a point of that, Ranganathananda was talking to me about this, that today it's quite popular for people to go travel to different gurus and go to different centers and try out different religions and different scriptures and whatnot. And but not to choose one, you know, not to stick with one, and to commit yourself to one. That's what he was talking about, or that's what is meant by one whole. Within the practice that you choose, under the guru that you have, you can do all. You have lots of permission for movement. You don't want to change your practice without your guru knowing it. You know, you don't want to add or take away something without speaking with your guru first about it. One, to make sure that you're not going to do something destructive to your practice, but two, also so that they know where you're at all the time and can give you accurate advice on where to go. So in that sense, you stay in the same hole. But as far as methods of, you know, searching inside, all of the different ways of doing it are up to you, and you can experiment, especially at our level, you know, to try different things to see, because we assume a lot of things that we don't notice anymore. And they can be the things that prevent us from taking a step forward in our practice. And so go in there and really, while you're in there, explore, become interested in your inner world, and notice, turn off all of the noise, and really turn your mind, instead of having your mind be a calculating organ of action, turn your mind into an ear, turn everything into an ear, and sit there and notice everything. Don't let anything catch you and make you too interested in it, but notice how things work in there. Notice, don't let thoughts just arise and fall. Well, actually, if you can do that, definitely do that. But if you're caught every now and then in the mind, become curious. How did I get caught? Where did that happen? And become aware of how that worked. Was it a combination of hearing something and having that, grab onto a memory, and that got you interested? And then, when you got restless, when you were opened your eyes to check the clock to see how long you've been meditating, don't let that event pass without considering it. Say, what triggered that? How did I suddenly become aware of being restless? Or how did my mind get restless? What was the thought that stirred that? Or what's happening? So that you become a master of the inner world, so that things don't happen without your knowledge. It's that lack of awareness that gets us in trouble, because desires are born at the subtle level before they actually manifest as desires. And if you don't catch them at that level, they turn into monsters. And usually we only notice desires when they're so fully developed that we can't do anything about them. They're just what I call in my own mind, the way I sort of see the thing happen is that they're sort of sparks from the fire initially that go up and they land on a piece of tinder, which means that the tinder would be like a memory that's associated with that. And that spark is usually caused by a sensation, by a subtle thought that didn't really have a shape yet, throws up a spark. That spark lands on the tinder. That tinder catches fire, it lands on a memory. That memory kind of catches fire, comes to the forefront. You notice it, you're looking at it. Now there's sort of an expectation of action based around it, and it gathers that amount of attention, then goes to the rest of the mind and gathers more of its buddies, past experience that you've done, problems that surrounded it, whatnot. And then by the time you really become aware, most of us are already in a state of mind. We're no longer dealing with just this little spark that we could have just put our thumb on, our mental thumb on, and just smudged it out and been finished. Now we're in a state of mind, and now we're battling something that's quite powerful within us. It's put us in the rut already, that we can't get out of, that we're stuck in. And so this information here that we're going to get, and that we're getting from Yama here, as he teaches us about the nature of our inner world, the nature of the reality that we're trying to become aware of in some respects and back into in other respects. This is meant to be very practical information. This isn't just for an academic exercise. It isn't just for rearranging the thoughts of your mind. It's for using to take you forward. It's if you read this and understand it and do it, surrender to it, this is meant to bring you to realization. And so see it that way and listen to it that way. And tomorrow, let your meditation be different because of what you learn from it, because of what you see in it. That it's meant to be employed. It's not meant to just be something that you now know, that you can argue about with someone. All right, so verse 1 here. Yama, the king of death, is talking, and he says, the self-existent supreme Lord. Okay, the self-existent. So he is the original cause. He's the first domino. And so we don't ask where that comes from, or what was before it, or how did it happen? Why is it there? Just the fact that he's self-existent means that this is a given. This is isness. There's not going to be a before it because it's outside of time. So there's no before and after. It's an eternal thing. right? So it's just there, and it exists for no reason. Nothing caused it, you know. So if you're outside of time, you have no cause and effect. So this being, or the self-existent supreme Lord, meaning he's the top of the chain. There's nothing to know beyond that. The self-existent Lord inflicted an injury upon the sense organs in creating them with an outgoing tendency. Right, and that's a great word. Inflicted an injury. One of the other in Gambhirananda's translation, he says it inflicted a wound. And I was kind of attracted to that idea because St. John of the Cross, in one of his poems, talks about how he had a vision of Jesus who kissed him and wounded him and then went away. And the wound was the fact that he went away, that he gave you this taste, this experience of his presence, this seeing of him, and the heart leaps and the hope rises, and you know, that wonderful thing. And then he leaves you, disappears, and you're left without anything, you know. And yes. And I think it's very interesting that this is an interfaith description, that God will leave a wound, leaves a wound in the self, you know. In this sense, it's a little different. He's saying that he inflicted an injury, meaning kind of something that harmed it or causes pain, in the sense that our sense organs have outgoing tendencies, which means they naturally go outside. They don't naturally go inside. We don't naturally sit down and meditate about what we are. We don't naturally pay attention to our inner world, mostly because we like change. You know, you can see this all the time. You know, I remember being on the beach in Santa Barbara for a beautiful sunset. Here go with one of my old stories. But it, you know, just shows you how the senses work. They like change. And I was sitting there looking at the sunset, and I was meditating on this beauty, you know, as the sun was setting over the Pacific Ocean, and it was that beautiful colors out there. And I was imagining how big that sun was and how far away it was and how it was millions of miles away. And I could still feel the heat from all that distance, and just trying to expand the limits of my thinking, you know. And all of a sudden I saw a used McDonald's bag go blowing across the beach in the wind, you know, tumbling along. And suddenly my senses, my eyes went and were all about just watching that McDonald's bag blow across the beach, you know. And I thought to myself, look at that. That's the nature of the senses. That here I am looking at this inexplicable wonder of a star close enough to my planet to feel its heat and to see its beauty. And what are my senses suddenly interested in? A discarded McDonald's bag, you know. And if that's just not the perfect metaphor for our situation, that within us is the divine beloved, infinite, immortal, ever free, ever pure, unconditioned love, absolute freedom, and some filthy little thing in the senses goes blowing across our awareness, and suddenly we're captured by this tininess, by this silliness, and get caught up in a story and get pushed around. So the Lord has done this on purpose. Really, Mother says at one point that she did it to keep the play going. You know, she said that at first the Lord started the world, and it kept ending because everybody was realizing God and not being interested in the world and popping out into realization, and the world kept having to be restarted. And he says then that at that point that God added lust and greed to the equation, and Mother laughed and said, and the game's been going on with a bang ever since. You know, the creation keeps going. And so the Lord created or added upon the sense organs this tendency for going out through the senses. Therefore, a man perceives only outer objects with them, and not the inner self. But a calm person, right, a sattvic person, a person who's balanced activity and inertia, has balanced tamas and rajas together and arrived at a still state, a balanced state, is not pulled in any direction, not pushed in any direction, but centered and calm and not distracted. He said, but a calm person wishing for immortality beholds the inner self with his eyes closed. Right? So in that still state, we become aware of the source of love within us. We become aware of the sense of love. We become aware of the boundarylessness that's within us. He says in verse 2, children pursue outer pleasures and fall into the net of widespread death. Right? So a lovely way of talking about our immaturity spiritually, that we're children and we pursue outer pleasures. They catch our attention. Right. And I repeat several times how a desire forms, according to Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, because it was very helpful for me in catching desires and to be able to deal with them before they become a problem. He says that desires are born of sensation that attaches or not attaches, but then a sensation that brings up a memory, and that sensation and that memory arise into your awareness and create a sense of expectation. You want to do it again. You want to experience that again. You want to repeat that feeling or that sensation or that joy or bliss or drunkenness or whatever it was that you're running after. And at that point, if it keeps going, again, it goes and grabs other memories and puts you into that state of mind where you're trapped. And so this meditation technique, this idea of going inward, seeing that desire arise before it becomes an actual desire, when it's just the impetus for a desire, and you catch it and put it out, because otherwise you fall into the net of widespread death. Right? What does that mean? How can that make you fall into the net of widespread death? Well, it causes you to identify with body. Right? Your desire hooks you into the body, and it's through the body that you experience these things. You forget that you're not the body. You start using the body for the pleasures, and you start seeing the desires of the body as your own desire. You start seeing the imbalances of the mind as your own imbalance. And this is very important to notice and to see this structure of things. I was diagnosed quite a few years ago now, coming up on 20 years ago, with severe depression. And they wanted to put me on medications, and I took them for a year. And I was terribly disturbed to be a monk on medication for depression. I thought that just doesn't jive. That for me, that's not the way I want to be. But I didn't want to quit the medicines. One, because Swami said it was a good idea to take the medicines if a doctor says so. He says Ramakrishna did, so you should too. And so I took them for a while to get an idea of how they changed the mind. I watched very closely to see how I changed on them. And anyway, in the meantime, I started working on a practice of being able to go in and take into the account that I'm not the body and I'm not the mind. And I stopped using the word I am depressed and started saying I'm looking through a depressed mind. And that gave me that ability to move, to kind of have some wiggle room there, to know that I became aware that my experience of depression was like putting on a pair of colored glasses. And when I put on colored glasses, I don't believe that the world is actually all pink. From the glass, from it, I don't believe that everything's actually turned pink. I make an adjustment because I know that I'm looking through pink glasses, and so I adjust for that. And when I used that idea that I'm not the mind, that I'm looking through a depressed mind, I could make an adjustment. I could say, look, things are not all dark. Things are not all negative. This is not forever. I'm in a state of mind. And things change. Whatever your condition at the moment is, know for certain it will pass. And it took me about 8 years of really practicing that, really working on that, along with 2 other practices, which I'll just throw out there. I'm not going to give the class on that, but 2 other practices was making sure that I trained my inner voice to respect God, because all my thoughts are the hearer of those thoughts, as we're going to see in these scriptures here tonight. The hearer of your thoughts is actually the divine, the beloved. And so I was in the habit of using harsh words when I spoke to oh, you idiot. Oh, I can't believe you've done that again, you stupid, whatever, blah, 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 blah. And that was kind of my inner dialogue at one point in my life. Very disrespectful, very hurtful. I didn't have much hope or respect in myself. And so, I started watching that voice and making sure that that voice started to respect me. And I used a scripture in Corinthians. You can read it yourself. Corinthians 13 verses 3 through 8 are the important ones. So First Corinthians, and it's a verse about love and the description of love. Love is kind, love is patient. Love does not speak ill of others. Love does not rejoice in evil. Love always hopes. Love always believes. Love always trusts. Love never fails. And I started demanding that list of qualities from my inner voice. You will not address the Lord. You will not address yourself in words any less, in moods any less than those. You must speak to the Lord, to me, the self, in that respectful way, in that hopeful way, in that always believing way. And so all of that together, I have managed to overcome that condition. I went off medications long ago. I only stayed on them for about a year and a half or so, and have put that behind me. And that's from the power of the scripture. That's from the power of this knowledge, these things that we're learning. So these things are infinitely practical. They are necessary for us to find a fulfilling life. Now, that's not their purpose. That's a byproduct of this truth. We don't use them to go looking for particular states or particular experiences. We use them for surrender, actually. And letting go, so that we can see what should have been obvious. That what is obvious can become apparent. My favorite little phrase there. All right, so children pursue these outer pleasures, right? He says it's immature to go pursuing outer pleasures. If you're caught in running after them, you're a child. You're not an adult. And Swami Brahmananda, I think, one time said, somebody complained that he referred to another monk as a boy, and he said, no boy is a man until he's realized God. Right. So that comes from the scripture. We are not adults. We're not grown up. We're not spiritually advanced until we stop pursuing our outer pleasures through this outgrowing sense. So that we don't fall into widespread death. How does that happen? If we identify with the body, and as the body dies, that practice of preparing for death, that if you believe yourself to be the body, and you've invested in its pleasures, and you've invested in its hungers and its desires, and you say to yourself, I'm hungry, instead of the body is hungry, or I'm sick instead of the body is sick, you connect your eye to the body. And when you're laying there on your deathbed, you're going to feel like I'm dying, not that the body is dying. Right. And so we want to be very careful about the words that we use. I know it's a little odd to speak that way, but I tell you, in my efforts to overcome that depression, changing the words and changing the way I described it was very, very important and very, very helpful. It kept me constantly mindful of the reality of it. So you don't want to get into the state where you identify the body's needs with yourself. Interestingly enough, I think we talked a day or two ago about the definition of freedom, right? If you identify with the body like that, and you say, I'm hungry, or I'm happy, or whatever, and you connect your eye to it, then you get stuck in that state. You begin to think that that's who you are. You can't move past it, and you will experience death. And the fear of that. You won't understand that it's the body dying, and that you can sit there and watch it die. And as you watch its noise fall away, right, you realize, wow, I'm still feeling like I've always felt as the self. I'm still just as present as I ever was. All is well, and I'm just observing the body shut down. And as the body shuts down, if you have that awareness of not being the body and not saying I'm dying, I'm watching the body die, you escape death. You bypass it. You watch it happen to the body. And when the body's finished, you have that sense of freedom because now that weight on you is gone. And, that sense of freedom remains, that you aren't stuck. Normally we define freedom as being able to do whatever we want. That's the absolute inverse of what freedom is. That's absolutely upside down. Freedom is to have no desire. That's the only freedom. And if you identify with the body, you will never experience that. The body is never without desire. And if it is for a moment, the mind will kick in and give it one. So practice these things. Understand what he's saying here to you. So children pursue outer pleasures and fall into the net of widespread death. But calm souls, those who are not hooked into it, having known what is unshakable immortality, right? Just by knowing I'm not the body and I'm not the mind, making the practice of constantly being aware of that, through our practice, we become aware of this unshakable immortality, something that's unchanging within us. As long as we're identified with body and mind, we're going to feel like we are changing and we're part of that changing world. So we become unshakable when we're able to distance ourselves from the body. We're not as bothered. I use this, I hope you don't mind my giving these personal examples of how I've used these things, but I broke my leg in the monastery too. At one point, a piano fell on my right leg and broke it, and experienced a great deal of pain from that. And I remember I had to lay in a bed in the front room because I couldn't get up the stairs to my room. I had to lay on a bed in the front room of the monastery with nothing. There was no radio, no television, and Swami and I were the only ones there. So I would just lay there by myself in silence. And at first I would just think about the pain in that leg. And it was like, oh my God, my leg hurts, my leg hurts, my leg hurts, right? And then when I started, again, practicing that separation, I'm not the body, I don't have to put my mind on the body. I don't have to put my mind on that pain, and started to try and put my mind on something different. That really helped me to deal with that, to deal with that fact when I had nothing else to do to distract me, to understand, no, I could just lift it and move it onto something different. So calm souls, having known how to use this, having known the truth of this, having employed this because it is true, they know what is unshakable and immortal. They do not cover any uncertain thing in this world. We don't want or need anything that changes because they only come through body and come through mind. This is one of those beautiful things when you go in within yourself and become aware of the presence of the divine, however that is for you. For me, it's usually Mother. When you begin to find some amount of silence inside, some freedom from the noise of the mind, it doesn't mean that your mind has gone completely quiet. What it means is you become uninterested in what the mind is doing. You understand that because you are not the mind, that its thoughts have nothing to do with you. That's how we get attached, is by believing that they're my thoughts and that they describe me and they describe my inner world. They do not. Thoughts are simply secreted by the mind. And that's one of the things you see when you begin watching. You see that one thought can always follows the previous thought, right? The subject of the previous thought or the previous thought defines what the next thought is. You cannot break that chain. You cannot have an original thought unrelated to any other thought. That's how you know that you're not in charge. That's how you know that it's not you, because you're not control. You can't control that. Every thought is related to the previous thought. And so by knowing that, you can let go and let them become impersonal. And if we do this, then we stop coveting the states of mind. You actually become aware that everything in this world is only a thought, right? All of the things that you see, what you're looking at, again, I'll say, look at the light. I'm not going to go into the normal direction with that, so don't worry, I'm not going to repeat it. But you look at the light and understand that that's a thought of the light. You're not seeing the light, you're seeing a thought of the light. And you're sitting in the thought of a room, and you're sitting in the thought of a chair, and you're inhabiting the thought of a body. Right? And you start understanding that everything is a thought. And when you become very closely familiar with that, that levels the playing field. You know, one thought is just not that different from another thought. You just interpret it differently. One you interpret as light, one you interpret as sound, one you interpret as touch, these things, and then they mix it together and creates the story of the world as you believe it to be. But so leveling the field then allows you to not covet anything of the changing world, anything of the mind. The mind is the changing world, the active mind. The mind with me and mine in it is Shakti, right? The mind with no me and mine in it is Shiva, you know, or whatever words you want to use for that. Brahman, the mind, the pure mind, the mind with no me and mine is Brahman. And so the mind with me and mine in it is active, it's changing, and that's the power of the mother in there. So that's Shakti, that creates the whole universe for you. So once you get this arrangement down, once you practice this, you know, not just for an hour in the morning, but all day long, sitting on the bus, walking through the grocery store, observing the constant set of hooks that pull you into believing that you're the mind and that you want what the mind wants and that you want what the body wants. And you subject yourself to slavery, interpreting it as freedom. That is Maya. Right? It is through Atman that one knows form, taste, smell, sounds, touches, and carnal pleasures. Right? It is the observing self that is intelligence. It's the observing self of the mind that actually knows and gives meaning to everything that's dancing in front of it. So that's where it is. It doesn't get that meaning until it bounces against the wall of Atman, as it were, right? It's not until it gets pushed on the wall that you know what something is. This is very important, to understand that nothing outside of yourself has any value, positive or negative. Things outside of the self, outside of the sense world, are not positive or negative. They have no value until they meet you. Right? And it's up to you how what value you give them, you know, what you're going to accept from them. So he says here, it's through the Atman that we know the form, the taste, the smell, the sounds, the touches, and the carnal pleasures. So you can use that also to understand that all of the things that you taste, touch, hear, smell, and I always feel like I forget one, but that all of the things of the senses are pointing at what? The Atman. You can use that to stay aware, right? You can use the constant change of the universe to constantly remind you that you're not changing, because you would not be able to witness all of that change if you were moving with it, like in an elevator. If you were part of the system, you couldn't see the change, you couldn't experience the change. So all of the movement of the senses doesn't have to attract you. You don't have to go out into it and play in it. It can point at this wonderful, calm individual that you are by nature within, utterly at peace, untouched by just random thoughts, not attaching to any of them, and not being disturbed, not being pulled into the stories of egoism, which is the end game of that ignorance. Is there anything that remains unknown to Atman? This verily is that. So he's asking a rhetorical question there. That the Atman is all-knowing. That's you know, and this Atman, this knower within you, that is what gives value to everything, or understands or sees everything, is verily that. Right? This is God. You don't have to go somewhere to experience God. You don't have to run after something. And this reminds you and allows you to actually experience the immanence of God, the closeness, the intimacy of the beloved, because it's actually God who's living your life. Your ego gives it your name, and takes responsibility for it and creates your karma and your story. But in fact, the divine experiences your experiences before you do. It takes a moment for your mind to generate ego awareness, right? So God actually experiences your life before you do. And so this can make your prayer very, very intimate. You know, in the beginning, we feel like we have to describe to God everything, right? Oh God, I was feeling this thing this morning and I was going through this and that happened. And then I really had trouble with this. And can you please help me with this and take care of that? And that's how prayer begins. Prayer ends, mature prayer, once we stop being a child who runs after the senses. Mature prayer is a complete opening. You don't have to describe anything to the Lord because you're aware the Lord could describe it to you. She's already seen it. He's already seen it, already experienced it. And so he knows your pain because he felt your pain. He knows your sadness because he lives your sadness. He knows your earnestness because he saw your earnestness. You know, so it's and so that's the clarity of it. So it reminds you that God is intimately aware and intimately present, and that it's not conditional. That's what an unconditioned love means. That presence is not going to be dictated by circumstance and condition. God is with you intimately, always and forever, and it is impossible for him to withdraw from you because he is you. And so you can use that always when the mind or the ego tries to trick you into a state of guilt or remorse that makes you feel separate and apart from the divine beloved. And it gives you a wonderful avenue of strength to sit there with the feeling of separation, separate from it, say, look at that feeling of separation, Mother. Look how that is trying to affect me. Look at the pain of that, you know. And just that exercise will allow you to experience the presence of Mother even when the body and mind are telling you that it's not there, or telling you that God is not with you, or God has judged you, or whatever story the ego has come up with. So it is the Atman it is through Atman that one perceives all objects in sleep or in the waking state. Now, we've had great fun in the last few days talking about this ad infinitum, right? That right now, this watcher of this world that is within us is going to, tonight when we lay down to fall asleep, we're going to renounce all of this. We're going to renounce all of our memories. We're going to renounce our body. We're going to renounce our family. We're going to renounce our experiences, our sense of self, our name, everything. And we're going to slip into a dream state. What is it that slips into the dream state? You know, it's that pure Atman that's undefined by condition and circumstance, the knower, that's going to slip into the dream and slip into another pillowcase, as Ramakrishna would say, and experience an entirely different world, experience an entirely different set of conditions and circumstances for itself. And it's a marvelous meditation to sit and think about that. What does my dreaming self share with my waking self? That will allow you to write the scriptures that we're studying right now. If you were able to sit there and think and understand, what does this waking Atman, my experiencer right now, my seer, what is the same, right? It's going to drop the name. Okay, so I'm not the name. If it's going to drop that and go into dream and become another name, it forgets the body. So I'm not the body. It's going to drop into a dream and take another body. It's not the story of my life, right? It's not my wife and children. It's not my emotions. It's not my memories. It's not my job. It's not my karma. It doesn't even take my karma with it. It goes in there and takes on new karma. You know, it takes a different, completely different story of life, a completely different sense of ego in there. So you see, you can get a very pristine idea of the nature of the self simply by taking this simple truth right here, that it is through the Atman that we perceive all objects in sleep or in the waking state. Right? So know this to be true. Having realized the vast, all-pervading Atman, the calm soul does not grieve. So what does this mean? This means if you understand this point, grief is gone for you. Grief is gone. Right? So don't run around thinking that you need another drink, or you need more friends, or you need another car, or you need a better job. The only way to get rid of suffering, to get rid of your grief, is to understand your nature, what you are. And this is being told to you right now with this information mixed with your practice and your surrender to its truth, because the ego is going to pretend it doesn't understand, it doesn't get it. It's going to tell you why it can't be that way. It's going to say you don't understand it, you can't get it. Don't worry about it. This comes in your next life. You know, whatever story your ego is going to create for you, withdraw from it. Remember that you're the Atman that changes egos when it slips into dream state, and then slips into another one when it comes back to the waking state. So egoism and its stories have nothing to do with you, no power over you. Right? Right now you think your memories have power over you, but they don't affect you when you walk into the dream. So your memories do not have power over you. Right? You think that your circumstances have power over you. But when you slip into the dream, you've got another completely different set of circumstances. So clearly your circumstances do not have power over you. So see how you can take this, a simple one line from the scripture here, and explore it, understand it, digest it, make it your own, so that you can naturally talk about it to somebody. You can hear somebody's pain, and you can tell them as a person, not as a reciter of scripture, not as a chanter, but as a person, without them even knowing that you are being scripture to them. You can tell them man to man, man to woman, friend to friend, mother to child. You can give them this truth in a way that they can digest it, in a way that's easy for them to see. Right? You can describe these things for them, and in that way, expand your sense of self. All right, so it is that we perceive objects in sleep and waking state, having realized this vast, all-pervading Atman, right? And understand this Atman is your inner world there. It's vast and all-pervading. This is when we talked this week about Brahman becoming all, that it is the substance that I used to call dream stuff or mind stuff. It's the thing that has become every object in your dream, then has become the ocean, the mountains, the people, the monsters, the gangsters, that it is Atman, or it is Brahman that has become all that. And this, this is that. This is why he keeps ending these sentences saying, this verily is that. These things are all in their natural state, that Brahman unmanifested in, before it takes the form of the mountains, before it takes the form of air and whatnot in the dream world. And so this is where that all-pervading comes from. In your dream, and actually not just in your dream right now, but it's easier to think about a dream because we've defined it more in our waking mind that way. This all-pervading Atman is literally all-pervading. That everything that you're experiencing in this moment, remember, it's a thought, it's a wave in the mind. It's the forms of, I'm going to say something terribly illegal. It's the forms of Brahman. In the fact that Brahman has become all of this, but is not all of this. It's important to keep it separate from all of this, but understand that we're in the manifested world. So it's rippling, it's being refracted by mind. But everything, you're walking through Brahman. You're sitting in Brahman right now. You're sitting on Brahman right now. You're breathing Brahman right now. Your thoughts are Brahman right now. This, and it's all the nature of love. And so this is the way we fall in love with God on the bhakti path. The bhakti path is by understanding that everything I see, hear, taste, touch, and smell right now is Brahman in manifestation. It's not Brahman itself, but it's Brahman in manifestation. Let me get away with that little slight of truth there. And know that is the intimacy of God. So not only is your beloved living your life before you do, your beloved is everything that you're experiencing at this moment, every bit of it. I found myself, I've been practicing this now for several months, where I get up in the morning and I just take a minute to touch my bed and run my hands on my bed back and forth, telling myself, I'm touching Brahman. You know, it's illegal, but it helps the mind get the notion that everything is Brahman. So I'll touch the bed, you know, and from that, just kind of look around the room and I'll tell myself, I'm in the dream of the beloved right now. And I start remembering the things that we've talked about over the last week, over, you know, about the nature of Atman. And I sit there just reminding myself, you know, this is Atman. And I have slipped into this from a dream state where I was something very different. Don't forget, what was I when I was between those two states, between sleep and dream? You know what? Between dream and waking. What was I at that moment when I was neither of them? What am I? And bring that in and sit there and just ponder for a moment to start your day in a context that is true. This world is unreal. This is just an arrangement of thoughts that I'm about to walk through in my imagined, walking through in my imagined time that belongs only to the dream, in my imagined cause and effect. And it allows you to take the stress of being and to frame it in a way that allows you to understand it is not forever. It is not real. And it cannot affect you because it did not affect you in the dream. So it need not affect you now, right? And understand that in its totality, this verily is that. This is my beloved. And walk through your day with the knowledge that you're literally walking through your beloved. And have that intimate experience of being, knowing that the most intimate secrets of your heart are laid open, and that even in that laying open, God is present with you, believes in you, hopes in you, trusts in you, and will never fail you. Build your life on that. We talked about the wise man that builds his house on the rock. That's how you do it. Build your house on that rock and go forward. And the storms will come, the difficulties will come, the winds and the rain and the waves will rail against you, but they cannot touch you, because they will be the winds, the rain, and the storm of a dream, whether it's waking or whether it's dreaming. All right? So we'll stop there for the evening and open it up for any questions here if you have any, or statements.
When you say build your house on that rock, what is the rock again?
The rock is the unchanging self, the self that is that which is the same in waking and dreaming, that sense of you. And I say sense of you, you know, that is the same between those two states. Imagine, what is it? I see it sort of like a sliver of a crystal, as it were. You know, that's the Atman in waking state, and it's got this story surrounding it. And tonight when I slip into sleep, just before I slip into the dream, when this has slipped out of the waking state, the identity with the conditions of waking state, and before it has slipped into the conditions and limitations of the dreaming state, what is it? You know, it's free of my ego. It's not identified with me. It doesn't have my history. It doesn't have my name. It doesn't have my body, my gender, my thoughts. It has nothing that I normally call me. And it slips into dream state, and now it's a bird, or it's a wizard, or it's a whatever I'm dreaming myself to be during my dream that night. So and when you wake up in the morning, it slips back out of that whole series of identities and attachments and slips into the new ones for the waking state. But between the two states, what is it? What belongs to it? That's the rock, you know. So build yourself build your life on the knowledge God is everywhere present and always perfect. Build your life on the knowledge that everything is merely a thought. Nothing has a value until it meets me, until I decide what its value is. Understand that God is with you implicitly and intimately and cannot be separated from you, and that the nature of that divinity is knowledge, is love. and this isness of being, and live according to that, not according to the story of your ego, not according to the senses of the body, not according to the conditions of mind. Right? Because you can see very clearly, if you look closely at these truths, you can see personally up front, not as a philosophical reality, not as a theological point, but as a reality of living, a reality of being. Right? Yes, sir.
A statement and a question. It's interesting when you were talking about like you're doing experiments. One experiment that I like to do, it's not necessarily neti, but I like to think like, what's my number one desire? And I've narrowed that down to staying alive, not dying. I think out of all the desires, that's probably would be my number one.
Uh-huh.
So sometimes I just sit and I say, what if I died right now? What would happen? Like I would be mean, and I would just try to just surrender everything and see what that feels like.
Mm.
And it feels like a weight has been lifted off your shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of the experiments that I do, but also just trying to exist in the be.
Uh-huh.
But I noticed that I think I can get there for maybe a half of a split of a second.
How about
when I identify it, it moves, or it's kind of like you see something in your eye, and when you look at it, it goes. So my question is, how do you know if you're in the being if you can't necessarily look at it directly, for lack of a better word?
Uh-huh. Okay, I got you. There's two things glaring for me right now. One is that practice or that experiment of trying to find out what your number one desire is. I'm glad you did it, and I'm glad it brought you to that. But that's a very dangerous experiment. That's a very dangerous experiment, because you're going to sit there cataloging all the things that you've been attached to and all the things that you have been fooled by. And there's a really good chance just reinforcing them like that is going to keep them on the top level of mind, so they're readily available for the next impulse to bring them up. Yeah, so that's a very dangerous one. A replacement for it would be to think of what is one thing that you know that doesn't depend on anything else that you know. That will take you right to the heart of the matter. You know, so something like that. And then the notion of you were saying you're trying to be. Is that what you said?
Yeah, I just try to sit in what I think I am.
Uh-huh.
You know, this sense of being here,
Uh-huh.
or just being in my body, or just being seated in wherever I am. Just trying to feel what that feels like.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes when I'm not thinking about it, I can feel it, but then immediately I want to confirm whether or not I've done it correctly.
Mm-hmm. And what you see in the way you describe that right now, you're intimately using body and mind to perceive self. Okay, that could be informative. That could be informative. But instead of trying to be, see if you can not be. Right? Flip it around, because we don't really know what being is in that context. You know, being has no definition. Being is infinite potential in silence. You know, and you have never not been. You can't stop being. So it might be more informational to try not to be, and then wonder why that's impossible, and what are the things that change as you try not to be, and that will show you the things that aren't. So, but a good stuff. That's the way. That's very helpful, you know, to play like that, just to start and to see. Make this your own. All right. Anyone else have a yes, Swami?
Couple of questions. One is, if you can kind of explain a little bit more about this concept that God experiences your story before your mind or the ego does, and how to use that for contemplation. And the second question is with this dream. I think I'm maybe too confused right now. Because most of the time in the dream, I mean, I understand that it's the unchanging Atman that's the background that goes through the different states. But in most of the dreams, I am the protagonist. I mean, create everything is my mind created, but I'm there, and a lot of it has to do with jumbled up experiences of my awake state. So there is some memory involved in there. I don't like forget Swayam and just become a bird. I'm there, but there's a bird also. So what does that? I mean, I don't even know if I'm asking the right question. It's just so confusing.
Okay. Well, the first one with the intimacy of God, right? Thou art that, right? That's the ultimate truth. You are the divine. And so by necessity, God is living your life. But we've made God other, right? Because we've taken on an ego. Ego is simply a boundary. We drew a line, and it's an arbitrary line. And we drew a line and we said, God's on that side and I'm on this side. And now I have to yell across that line to talk to my beloved. And we all know how difficult that is. That language is very ineffective for talking to your beloved, right? And so this idea that thou art that puts God on your side of the line for that prayer. You don't have to talk across the line. And that line is you see yourself as body mind, and God can't see inside your body mind, doesn't know your body mind. God is out there. This truth removes that barrier. Does everybody remember the story of the two old people at MoMA, at the Museum of Modern Art in New York? Okay. Yeah, that story is very apropos for this. So that when you struggle, okay, probably not everybody knows that story. I'll just tell you. I'll give you the quick version. I was having lunch in the Museum of Modern Art with a friend of mine, a devotee, a few years ago, and we were in the cafeteria. It was very noisy in there, all kinds of cacophony because they had melamine tables and tile floors. And I looked across the room, and this very old couple. I mean, they look like way too old to be at the museum. I mean, they're hunchbacked and very, very old people. And they both had their arms on the table, and just their two fingers were touching across the table. And they weren't saying anything to each other. And of course, I was projecting all this as I sat there looking at them. And I just saw the contentment that they had, that there was nothing to be said. They had already told each other all their jokes. They know each other so well that nothing was necessary. That for them right then, just being together created their own atmosphere in this room of cacophony. They sat in silence together in love, in a life shared, I was guessing, their lifetime. And so that, to me, was immediately a direct manifestation of pure prayer. When it's no longer necessary for you to tell God anything, that your prayer is just to let yourself be aware that God knows in a knowing way, in a deep way, not just an assignment sort of way, but you feel something, it hurts you, or a memory comes up that was painful. You don't have to describe it. You instantly share. You just become aware. God has full access, and you sit there together looking at it. You sit there together feeling it, right? And that intimacy is wonderful. That intimacy is ecstatic. That intimacy is delightful. And so to use this truth that this verily is that. Use that to get very intimate in your prayer in that. And then what was the second question?
It was a convoluted thing.
Oh, about the dream.
Yeah.
About the dream. Well, yeah, that's more of an exercise for kind of trying to put a handle on something that doesn't have a handle, like the Atman obviously doesn't have a handle, and we can't really understand it because it can't really fit into mind. But it gives you a way of kind of, well, I don't know how to say it. It gives you a way of having a sense of knowing of what that is. And so your dreams may be composed, what you're seeing in the dream may be composed of memories, but in your dream you don't have the same set of memories that you have in the waking state, right? You can't sit there and think about, I don't know if you can think about anything, but if you go into in that dream, you're just not going to remember the assignment that you have to do for work in the morning. You're not going to remember the names of your children. You're not going to remember what kind of car is parked in the garage and where you put the keys when you got out of it. So you have a different set of memories in the dream than you do when you're in waking state. So from that, you can infer that you are not your memories, all right? Because the same I is there in both cases, but one I has this set of memories, and another I, the waking I, has a different set of memories, but it's the same I. So you can just keep thinking of the experience of I between those two states, and anything that is different can't be the I. So it's a way of kind of doing neti in a third party sort of way that you can watch and look and see the truth of it, because you're experiencing it. You know, you're witnessing the truth in the sense that the I of the dream does not have the same body as the I of the waking state. So you can't be the body. You know, the I of the dream state doesn't have the same memories as we just talked about. It doesn't have the same abilities. It doesn't have the same job. It doesn't have the same age. It doesn't necessarily have the same gender, you know. So you can just go through that thought process, just comparing the experience of I to the I of the dream that you remember. And it just clarifies for you. It shows you in a tangible way the truth of the scripture. And that is something we can carry with us. And you can remind yourself while you're sitting in your office at work, gosh, the I last night didn't have an office. So this I really doesn't have an office. This is the dream that I'm observing, you know. So I should not be identified by this. I play along in the dream for fun, you know, in companionship with the Atman, with the self, with the ever-present Lord. And you become aware this desk is my beloved. Literally, I can stroke this desk and I'm literally stroking my beloved, you know. And you can do it. I found myself the other day, I kid you not, because I said I've been practicing this now. Oh, I'm being tempted for dinner. It looks like dinner is being served. But you see how you can use this stuff in order to know that that pizza is not real. And it reminds you what's not real, and it takes away, it puts the stress at arm's distance, so you have that wiggle room to not be stressed by it, to say that this is not real, it's part of a story that I'm in, and that when this story ends, there'll be something completely different potentially. All right, I'm going to go to get some of that pizza before it ends up on the floor. All right, go forward.
Thank you.
Indeed.